"You won't believe your own eyes," whispered Liesel Schmidt under her breath as the morning sun spilled over endless fields of golden wheat, stretching farther than she thought any land could. The air shimmered with heat, carrying the scent of fresh earth and dew still clinging to the grass, mingling with the faint aroma of burning wood from distant farmhouses. Liesel stepped down from the truck with a mixture of awe and hesitation, her gray uniform sticking to her skin, the metal tag at her chest catching the sunlight in brief flashes. She followed behind Corporal James Reynolds, who moved with a casual authority, his boots pressing into the soft dirt of the rural Virginia farmland. Around them, American farmers worked steadily, hands tanned and rough, faces open and lined from years under the sun, eyes lifting briefly to acknowledge their new visitors without fear or judgment. The clink of metal tools, the low hum of conversation, the soft clatter of a wheelbarrow on the packed earth, all formed a symphony of normal life that seemed impossible to Liesel, who had been told to expect savagery, cruelty, and distrust. Her gaze caught a wooden sign staked at the edge of the nearest field. Schmidt. Her heart skipped, fingers tightening on the straps of her bag. Another sign further down read Muller. Liesel froze, eyes widening, mind racing to reconcile the names with the people moving before her, lifting bales of hay and guiding livestock with careful hands. She watched a man bend to scoop a pail of water, his cap tilted back, the sunlight painting his hair in copper tones, and she realized the names belonged to these people, real people, not symbols, not echoes of propaganda. Her lips parted slightly, but no sound came. Disbelief hung in the air around her like the summer haze rising from the fields. James stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear, explaining that many families had German roots, names carried across generations, yet the lives they led here were bound to the land, to community, to a rhythm of work and care that had nothing to do with the conflicts she had known. Liesel's eyes scanned the field again, noting the gentle interactions, the careful gestures between father and son, mother and daughter, a rhythm of life and cooperation, a kindness that required no weapons, no uniforms, no authority beyond human decency. The sun climbed higher, making the heat press against her back, yet Liesel remained frozen, absorbing the shock of recognition, the impossibility of what she saw. She watched a farmer laugh at a minor mishap with a plow, the sound carrying across the rows, a simple human moment that felt revolutionary. Her chest tightened as she realized that the world she had been taught to fear was far more complex, far more generous, and far more ordinary than she could have imagined. James' hand rested briefly on her shoulder, a grounding presence, guiding her forward without breaking the fragile spell of her discovery. Every step she took brought her closer to the farmers, yet the distance of fear and expectation still lingered, a ghost she was learning to release. Liesel's eyes followed a young girl, no older than 10, weaving between rows, carrying a basket of corn, smiling up at a man whose laugh crinkled the corners of his eyes, and in that smile, Liesel glimpsed a humanity that no propaganda, no war, could erase. She exhaled slowly, letting the tension drain from her shoulders, feeling the warmth of sun and soil and understanding settle in. In this shock, in this small revelation of common ground, Liesel sensed the possibility of connection, a thread of kinship that stretched across oceans and histories, fragile yet undeniable, waiting for her to step into the field and be a part of it. Corporal James Reynolds led Liesel Schmidt across the sun-drenched expanse of the farm, the soft crunch of dry soil beneath their boots mingling with the distant clatter of a tractor in the field. The heat pressed gently against her uniform, making every movement deliberate. Yet Liesel felt a curiosity she had not expected, an eagerness to understand the rhythms of this place that seemed so ordinary and yet entirely unlike the world she had known. James motioned toward a row of apple trees, their leaves rustling softly in the light breeze, and explained the task for the day. The women were to assist with harvesting, to follow the farmer's lead, to observe, to learn, and to lend their hands to the rhythm of life. Liesel's eyes traced the motion of a man lifting a crate of apples, his posture steady, muscles flexing with practice, the sweat on his brow glinting in the morning sun. She noticed the names stitched on his worn shirt cuff: Bauer, Schmidt, Muller. The repetition of familiar syllables against the backdrop of such alien comfort made her pause, her mind racing to reconcile familiarity with the strangeness of the environment. A young girl, perhaps 12, ran past carrying a wicker basket, her laughter carried across the orchard, mingling with the distant song of a bird perched on a fence post. Liesel felt a flicker of something like wonder, something that prickled beneath her chest, as if she were breathing in a new world in which fear and suspicion were not the only constants. James stayed close, observing her reactions with a quiet patience, never imposing, never explaining too much, letting her absorb the subtle cues that spoke volumes. As the morning wore on, Liesel began moving alongside the farmers, lifting crates, guiding sacks of apples, her hands quickly understanding the weight, the texture, the cooperation involved in shared labor. Each name she passed, each familiar surname spoken aloud by the farmers, reinforced the dissonance between what she had learned and what she now experienced. Liesel paused at the edge of the orchard, watching a man carefully tend to a young sapling, guiding its growth with hands gentle yet firm. She understood, in that slow unfolding moment, that names carried histories and connections, not just echoes of conflict. The heat grew more insistent as the sun rose higher, but Liesel found herself forgetting discomfort in the face of observation, the focus shifting to the rhythms of work, the cadence of hands, the silent communication between those who shared the land. She saw a woman pouring water from a tin pail, offering it to a farmer whose shirt clung to his back with sweat. The gesture was simple, ordinary, yet it resonated profoundly with her. Trust, care, and mutual respect existed here, without ceremony, without formality, without coercion. James nodded toward a fence line, encouraging Liesel to follow a farmer guiding a team of horses, their movements precise, deliberate, synchronized with the sounds of hooves and harnesses. The names called out to her again, simple identifiers that now carried weight beyond the syllables. Human, familiar, rooted. Liesel's breathing slowed, each inhale carrying a mixture of heat, dust, and realization. She was beginning to understand that the world of the farm was a space where identities intertwined with action, where fear could give way to observation, where humanity revealed itself in measured gestures, in the care for plants, animals, and neighbors alike. James observed her transformation silently, offering no guidance beyond presence, allowing her to connect the lines between history, expectation, and lived reality. The afternoon light slanted across the fields, casting long shadows, warm and golden. Liesel paused again, her hands resting on the edge of a wooden crate, feeling the rough grain against her skin, the continuity of effort across generations. Around her, the cadence of labor continued, farmers laughing softly, children running freely, birds tracing arcs in the sky. In this subtle shock, this gentle revelation of connection and shared heritage, Liesel's posture eased, her eyes brightened, and the first understanding settled in. This was a land where names told stories not of conflict, but of endurance, of roots, of ordinary human goodness that persisted despite the chaos of history. The sun dipped toward mid-afternoon, heat lingering on skin and soil, and Liesel took her first tentative steps alongside the others, hands moving with purpose, eyes absorbing the subtle choreography of life around her, feeling, at last, that the world could hold more than she had been taught to expect. The afternoon sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the rows of corn, making the green stalk shimmer as if alive with movement. Liesel Schmidt adjusted the straps of her bag, feeling the rough weave of her uniform against her skin, sweat beginning to form at the nape of her neck. Yet her attention was entirely absorbed by the farm around her. She followed the path James Reynolds had indicated, moving between the neat rows of crops, observing how each farmer bent and straightened in a practiced rhythm, lifting baskets, tying bundles, checking the irrigation lines with precision. Every motion was familiar to them, yet entirely new to her, each gesture a silent communication in a language she was only beginning to understand. A boy, no older than 10, ran ahead carrying a bucket of water, tipping it carefully so none spilled, his laughter ringing across the field, a simple sound that made Liesel pause, catching her breath in a mixture of astonishment and curiosity. James moved beside her, quiet, giving her space while occasionally pointing out small details, a knot in a fence that needed repair, the proper way to lift a basket to avoid strain, the subtle differences between the soil near the creek and the soil in the upper field. Liesel watched the names on the barns and fences again, each one like a breadcrumb through the landscape of her own memories, connecting the foreign and the familiar in ways that made her chest tighten with recognition. She followed a farmer carrying a basket of tomatoes, noticing how his hands handled the fruit carefully, as if he knew each one personally, and she realized that care was the common thread that tied this place together. The sun beat down, and the heat rose from the ground in waves, but Liesel barely noticed, absorbed in the cadence of labor, the quiet cooperation of people working together, the small gestures of generosity she had not anticipated. A woman approached, carrying a tray of water and sandwiches, her smile warm, eyes crinkled with kindness, and Liesel hesitated before accepting, fingers brushing against the metal tray, feeling the weight and warmth, sensing the trust implied in the act. She sipped water, tasting the coolness and relief, feeling the unexpected calm that came with being treated as part of this world rather than as an outsider. James nodded slightly, a subtle encouragement, allowing her to take in the scene, the rhythm, the humanity that was unfolding before her eyes. Liesel began moving more fluidly between the rows, lifting baskets alongside the farmers, mimicking the motions, observing carefully, learning not just the mechanics of the work, but the way the farmers carried themselves, the patience, the attention, the subtle communication without words. She paused to watch a man guide a horse through the orchard, noting the gentle firmness of his hands, the careful steps of the animal, the quiet understanding that seemed to exist between them. The names on the gates, the barns, the fences, continued to echo through her mind. Schmidt, Bauer, Muller, linking the present moment to the history she carried with her, grounding her in a sense of connection she had not expected to find in this foreign land. Each hour passed slowly yet filled with detail, Liesel absorbing the nuances, the gestures, the steady hum of daily life, recognizing that understanding did not require words, only attention, presence, and observation. The shadows lengthened as the sun moved westward, the temperature still warm but less oppressive, and Liesel found herself breathing more easily, letting the rhythm of the farm, the quiet cooperation, the small acts of kindness settle into her understanding. She began to sense patterns, to anticipate movements, to feel the weight of her hands and the work as an extension of herself, and in that rhythm, she discovered a surprising clarity. James moved beside her without speaking, offering support through presence alone, guiding her subtly through the day, letting her make the connections, observe the details, integrate herself into the flow of activity. As the afternoon waned, the farm seemed to stretch endlessly, a tapestry of green and gold, human effort and care, and Liesel felt a deepening sense of possibility, a realization that the world could hold unexpected warmth, that names and faces and gestures could build bridges, and that even in a place she had considered entirely foreign, she could begin to find her place, step by step, breath by breath, within the rhythm of ordinary life. The late afternoon sun draped the farm in golden light, the long shadows of the corn stalks stretching like quiet sentinels across the soil. Liesel Schmidt paused to adjust her grip on a wooden crate, her palms rough against the worn surface, sweat collecting along her wrists, yet she felt a subtle exhilaration, a new understanding stirring with each careful step. Corporal James Reynolds moved alongside her, his presence steady, providing guidance without words, letting her immerse herself in the cadence of the farm. Across the field, farmers bent and straightened in a seamless rhythm, their hands skilled and practiced, moving baskets, repairing fences, guiding animals with quiet assurance. Liesel's gaze traveled along the names etched into the barn doors and fences, familiar German surnames intertwined with the unfamiliar landscape, a bridge between what she had known and what she was witnessing. A small group of children ran past carrying baskets of produce, laughter ringing clear and bright, bouncing off the sunlit rows, and Liesel felt an unexpected warmth, a recognition of simple joy that transcended language and expectation. James paused to point out the subtle details, how to tie a bundle of corn properly, the method to ensure the soil did not compact around the roots, and Liesel absorbed each lesson with careful attention, her mind weaving together observation and experience into comprehension. The heat rose from the earth, pressing against the back of her neck and arms, yet she barely noticed, drawn entirely into the rhythm of shared labor and quiet cooperation. A woman approached carrying a jug of fresh water and a small tray of bread and cheese, smiling gently as she offered them to Liesel, who hesitated before taking the refreshment, fingers brushing the smooth surface of the bread, tasting the cool water and the subtle richness of the cheese, realizing the ordinary kindness of this act could hold profound meaning. Liesel moved through the rows, lifting and carrying, bending and straightening, synchronizing her movements with the farmers, learning not only the mechanics of the work, but the unspoken communication of a community in motion. The names she had seen earlier now carried a sense of lineage, of connection, of human continuity, grounding her in the reality of this place and its people. The sun shifted slowly across the sky, casting changing patterns of light and shadow across the fields, and Liesel felt a deepening sense of observation, of awareness, of belonging within the patterns unfolding around her. She watched a man guide a horse through a narrow path between fields, the animal responding with careful steps, ears flicking, muscles flexing, and she understood the patience, the trust, the partnership that was at work without needing explanation. James remained near her, stepping lightly, offering only subtle gestures of encouragement, allowing Liesel to draw conclusions and insights from her own observations. The farmers spoke in soft tones, laughter punctuating the rhythm of the day, hands coordinating with ease, gestures precise, and Liesel absorbed the scene as if watching a delicate choreography, each action building a tapestry of understanding and recognition. The warmth of the afternoon pressed against them, yet Liesel's focus remained, each movement she made in harmony with the others reinforcing her connection to the land and to the people, each action an affirmation of trust and cooperation. She felt a subtle exhilaration in matching the rhythm, in feeling the weight of the baskets, the texture of soil beneath her fingers, the cool water against her skin, the gentle sun warming her back, and with each step she felt her perspective shift, understanding that the world she had anticipated was not the only one that existed, that ordinary gestures and names carried depth and history, and that kindness could be as powerful and transformative as any lesson she had been taught. Shadows lengthened further, the colors of the farm deepening with the approach of evening, and Liesel moved with purpose, hands and eyes attentive, integrating herself fully into the flow of life around her, feeling, in every motion and glance, the quiet resonance of shared humanity, the subtle shock of discovery settling into understanding, and the gentle promise of connection that this ordinary yet extraordinary day had revealed. The golden afternoon deepened, casting a warm haze over the farm as Liesel Schmidt moved with careful deliberation through the rows of ripening corn. Each stalk swayed gently with the breeze, brushing against her arms, carrying the scent of earth, sunlight, and growth. She adjusted the wooden crate she had been carrying, noticing the slight warmth of the wood against her palms, the rough texture grounding her in the tangible reality of labor and effort. Corporal James Reynolds walked nearby, his steps measured, his eyes alert but patient, giving her space to absorb the scene, to notice the rhythm, the subtle choreography of a working farm. The farmers moved with seamless coordination, lifting, carrying, stacking, speaking softly to one another, the cadence of their voices mingling with the low hum of insects and the rustling leaves. Liesel paused at a fence line, observing a man guiding a horse through the orchard, hands steady and confident, the animal responding with trust, each movement deliberate, a lesson in patience and attention that did not require instruction. She followed his example, her hands learning the gestures, the timing, the balance needed to navigate the field without disturbing the fragile harmony of motion. The names on the barns and signs, familiar from her own language and culture, continued to echo in her mind, a thread connecting past and present, memory and observation, highlighting the strange convergence of familiarity and novelty. A woman approached carrying a small pitcher of cool water and a loaf of bread wrapped in a cloth, offering them with a gentle smile and a nod. Liesel accepted cautiously, feeling the weight of the loaf, the smoothness of the crust, the unexpected warmth of the gesture. She sipped the water, feeling the relief of refreshment, tasting the simplicity and goodness of nourishment offered without expectation. Around her, children ran across the fields, their laughter ringing clear, bouncing off fences and rows of crops, and she felt a flicker of something like astonishment, a recognition that joy could exist in this ordinary, ordered world, even amid her uncertainty. James Reynolds gestured subtly toward the work at hand, letting Liesel take the lead in lifting baskets, guiding sacks, observing the farmer's methods and adopting them, learning through careful attention. The heat pressed on her skin, sun warming her shoulders and arms, but the rhythm of labor, the cadence of gestures, and the quiet communication between people captured her focus. She noticed how the farmers moved with a sense of purpose, each action deliberate yet effortless, as if the land itself directed their efforts. And in this observation, she began to understand patterns, relationships, and the subtleties of cooperation. Liesel's eyes swept across the field once more, taking in the expanse of green and gold, the way shadows shifted with the sun, the interplay of light and movement, absorbing details, noticing gestures, understanding that every simple act carried meaning, conveyed trust, or reinforced the bonds of shared work. James remained close, offering presence rather than words, his calm watchfulness a reassurance that she was allowed to learn at her own pace, to notice without pressure, to integrate herself into the rhythm of the farm. Liesel moved through the afternoon, hands and eyes attentive, matching the cadence of those around her, internalizing the lessons of patience, precision, and human connection that unfolded in every moment. She felt the subtle thrill of discovery in the ordinary, the quiet revelation that names, gestures, and shared work could convey trust, kinship, and belonging without ceremony, without expectation, simply through the ordinary flow of life on the farm. The sun tilted toward evening, light shifting to amber, warmth lingering, shadows lengthening across rows of corn and wheat, and Liesel's chest rose and fell steadily, each breath carrying the understanding that she was part of something larger, a web of care, effort, and human rhythm, learning through observation, through attention, and through the quiet generosity that filled the fields and hearts around her. A gentle awakening to the ordinary yet extraordinary humanity that thrived in these vast, sunlit spaces. The sun dipped lower toward the horizon, painting the wide Virginia fields in deep amber, the shadows of corn and wheat stretching across the soil like long, silent fingers. Liesel Schmidt paused beside a wooden fence post, her hands resting on the rough-hewn wood, feeling its grain beneath her fingers as the gentle breeze carried the scent of sun-warmed earth and ripening crops. She watched as the farmers continued their work, bending and straightening, lifting baskets, guiding livestock, the rhythm of their movement steady and unhurried, a harmony born of practice and familiarity. James Reynolds walked beside her, his presence quiet, steady, a grounding force, offering no instructions, only the assurance of his watchful eyes and careful steps. A boy ran past, carrying a crate of tomatoes, his laughter cutting through the soft drone of insects and the distant hum of machinery, and Liesel felt a small, surprising lightness, a recognition of joy and innocence that seemed to thrive in this place untouched by the fears she had carried across the ocean. She lifted her crate again, aligning herself with the rhythm of the farmers, her movements growing more natural with each repetition, the weight of the produce a tangible measure of her growing connection to this land and its people. Names she had observed earlier, etched on barns and fences, continued to echo in her mind: Schmidt, Muller, Bauer, each one a thread weaving together the present moment with history, ancestry, and shared humanity. A woman approached with a tray of water and fresh bread, offering them with a gentle smile, and Liesel accepted, feeling the weight of the bread, the coolness of the water, tasting relief and warmth, an ordinary gesture layered with profound meaning. She observed a man guiding a horse along a narrow path between fields, hands confident and firm, yet gentle, the animal moving with trust, a subtle dance of patience and understanding that required no words. Liesel began to anticipate movements, adjusting her own steps, her hands and arms working in tandem with the rhythm around her. The repetitive motion reinforcing a sense of integration, of belonging to a shared task, a shared space. James remained close, silent support, allowing her to notice, to learn, to absorb without interference. Shadows lengthened and shifted with the sun, casting a golden glow across the landscape, highlighting the interplay of light and motion, of labor and care, each gesture meaningful, each movement a lesson in observation and empathy. The gentle hum of activity, the coordinated movements of the farmers, the occasional soft laughter or call of children, blended into a melody of daily life, grounding Liesel in the present while expanding her perception of trust, patience, and cooperation. She felt the sun on her back, the subtle strain of muscles adjusting to unfamiliar tasks, the texture of earth, wood, and produce beneath her hands, and with each passing moment, the rhythm of work and human interaction became increasingly intuitive, a language of movement and attention rather than words. The air shimmered in the late afternoon heat, carrying the distant song of birds and the soft clatter of tools, and Liesel moved with deliberate care, attuned to the nuances of this world, noticing details that spoke of generosity, diligence, and quiet human connection. She realized that the ordinary acts of tending the land, of sharing water and bread, of guiding animals and children, were themselves profound, revealing the depth of humanity in the everyday. The sun continued its descent, the sky deepening into soft gold and pale rose, and Liesel walked among the rows with steady, attentive steps, hands engaged, eyes observing, heart quietly opening to the understanding that trust and connection could be built through simple, consistent acts, a gentle lesson carried in rhythm, motion, and shared purpose across this sunlit farm. The sun had begun its slow descent, casting the farm in shades of amber and burnt gold, the light glinting off the leaves of the corn and wheat, painting a warm haze across the fields. Liesel Schmidt moved carefully, carrying another wooden crate, the weight familiar now, almost comforting, each lift a measured rhythm that synchronized with the subtle motion of those around her. She watched as the farmers bent and straightened in a practiced dance, hands deftly handling baskets of produce, adjusting tools, speaking softly to one another, their voices carrying through the field in a low, steady hum. James Reynolds remained near her, walking with deliberate patience, giving her the space to absorb each gesture, each detail, allowing the nuances of farm life to speak to her without interruption. Liesel noticed the names on fences, barns, and signposts again, each one a small anchor to the past: Schmidt, Bauer, Muller, names that resonated within her memory while belonging fully to this new land, a strange and comforting paradox. A young boy ran past, carrying a pail of water to a farmer, tipping it carefully so none spilled, laughing as he went, the sound echoing softly against the backdrop of rustling leaves and distant animal calls. Liesel felt an unexpected lightness, a flicker of recognition that joy and trust could exist so naturally, so effortlessly, in this space. She paused to observe a man guiding a horse along a narrow path between fields, hands firm but gentle, the animal responding with an understanding that required no words, and Liesel sensed a lesson in patience, in attentiveness, in quiet connection. James gestured subtly toward her, indicating she should follow, allowing her to practice lifting baskets, stacking produce, adjusting tools, moving in rhythm with the farmers, learning through observation and repetition, integrating herself into the living, breathing flow of the farm. The warmth of the afternoon sun pressed against her skin, yet the steady cadence of work, the harmony of motion, and the understated generosity she observed held her attention more strongly than discomfort. Liesel took a deep breath, letting the scent of sun-warmed soil, ripening crops, and distant hay mingle in her senses, grounding her, linking her movements to the world around her. She watched a woman offer a loaf of bread and a pitcher of water to a farmer, a simple act executed with care and without expectation, and Liesel recognized in it a profound truth. Trust, kindness, and community could be expressed without ceremony, through ordinary gestures repeated consistently. Her hands moved in time with the farmers, lifting, carrying, adjusting, aligning with their movements, her awareness expanding to include not only the mechanics of the work, but the subtle relationships and shared understanding embedded in each action. James continued silently at her side, present but unobtrusive, allowing her to form her own observations, to internalize lessons through attention and immersion rather than instruction. Shadows lengthened and deepened, painting the fields with patterns of light and dark, highlighting the contours of the earth, the lines of crops, the arc of human motion in concert with the land. Liesel noticed the small moments, a laugh, a glance, the tilt of a hat, the careful placement of a basket, each one conveying unspoken messages of cooperation, respect, and shared purpose. She felt a deepening sense of integration, her movements becoming more natural, her attention more focused, and with each repetition, the rhythm of the farm became a language she could understand, a bridge connecting her past and present, her memory, and this unfolding reality. The sun continued to lower, bathing the farm in soft gold, the heat lingering but gentle, and Liesel moved with attentive hands, careful eyes, and a heart quietly opening, recognizing that in ordinary labor, in gestures of care, in shared effort, there existed a quiet, sustaining humanity that transcended fear, expectation, and distance, a realization that filled her with awe and a sense of belonging within this sunlit, vibrant world. The late afternoon light softened across the farm, turning the rows of corn and wheat into a tapestry of gold and green, each stalk swaying gently in the warm breeze. Liesel Schmidt walked alongside James Reynolds, her hands now steady, her movements synchronized with the rhythm of the farmers, each step a learning, a connection to the land and to the people who tended it. She noticed the subtle interactions between the farmers, a nod here, a gesture there, a soft word exchanged, all of them speaking a language of cooperation and care that required no translation. The familiar German names, Bauer, Schmidt, Muller, continued to surface on fences and gates, yet their presence no longer startled her. Instead, they anchored her, weaving the threads of familiarity into the vast, sun-drenched landscape of this new place. A young girl skipped past carrying a basket of freshly harvested apples, her laughter light, ringing across the fields, mingling with the distant clatter of a wheelbarrow and the soft hum of insects. Liesel paused, taking a deep breath of warm air mixed with the scent of earth and growing crops, feeling the pulse of life in the farm, the quiet dignity of ordinary labor, and the subtle generosity in every gesture. James pointed out a row of young tomato plants, showing her how to lift the soil gently, how to support the stems as they grew, and Liesel followed his guidance, hands brushing against the earth, learning the language of touch and attention, of patience and respect. She watched a man lead a horse down a narrow path, his hands firm but gentle, guiding the animal with care, and she understood in a visceral way the trust embedded in each motion, the partnership between human and creature, a lesson in observation, restraint, and empathy. The afternoon heat pressed against her back, but she hardly noticed, absorbed entirely in the cadence of work, the harmony of effort, and the gentle lessons unfolding around her. A woman brought a pitcher of water and a loaf of bread, offering them with a smile, and Liesel accepted, feeling the weight, the texture, the nourishment, a simple act that carried profound meaning. She moved among the farmers, lifting, guiding, observing, integrating herself into the rhythm, learning not just the mechanics but the subtleties of communication, trust, and shared purpose. James walked nearby, quiet, unobtrusive, letting her draw her own conclusions, absorb her surroundings, and internalize the patterns of motion and attention. Shadows lengthened, casting a warm amber glow over the fields, highlighting the interplay of light and movement, of hands and soil, of people and land. Liesel felt a subtle exhilaration in the ordinary, the rhythm of labor teaching her more than words ever could, revealing the quiet power of cooperation, trust, and attention to detail. She began to anticipate movements, matching them instinctively, feeling the gentle sway of baskets, the texture of earth, the warmth of sun, and the cadence of shared work guiding her understanding of human connection. The distant song of birds and the soft rustle of leaves framed her awareness, each small sound reinforcing the patterns of life unfolding around her. She recognized the small acts of generosity, a hand steadying a basket, a smile exchanged, a gesture of guidance, and understood that these simple actions could build bridges, connect worlds, and instill trust. Liesel breathed in the fading warmth, the scent of ripening crops, the texture of soil, and the quiet confidence of humans moving together. Feeling herself becoming part of this living pattern, her own presence synchronized with the rhythm of life around her, aware that in the ordinary, in gestures repeated and observed, there was a profound humanity waiting to be noticed and embraced. The sky shifted toward a deeper gold as the afternoon waned, and Liesel Schmidt continued along the edge of the orchard, hands calloused but steady, eyes tracing the movements of the farmers who seemed to glide through their work with a quiet certainty. Each step she took was measured, mindful of the uneven soil beneath her boots, the texture of earth warm from the sun, the faint crunch of dried leaves and broken stalks accompanying her progress. James Reynolds remained close, his shadow stretching alongside hers, a calm presence, offering no words but lending reassurance through proximity and shared pace. Liesel observed the interplay of gestures among the farmers, a nod to signal a need for a tool, a gentle laugh in response to a small mistake, a hand extended to steady a crate or a basket, the subtle choreography of human cooperation unfolding naturally, effortlessly, and entirely without expectation. She paused to watch. A man adjusting the angle of a wooden wheelbarrow, the sun catching on the worn metal handles, glinting briefly, and felt a sudden sense of clarity, recognizing that efficiency, care, and humanity could coexist in ordinary work. The familiar German names on fences and barns continued to resonate in her mind: Schmidt, Muller, Bauer, yet their presence no longer jarred her. They were markers of connection, threads linking her memory and culture to this new, sunlit world. A young boy darted past, balancing a small pail of water, his bare feet dusted with soil, his laughter ringing like a bell across the fields, carrying joy in a pure, unassuming form. And Liesel allowed herself a brief smile, feeling a warmth that had been foreign in her recent months. She adjusted the strap of her bag, feeling the familiar weight and texture of the wood beneath her hands, noting the rise and fall of her breathing. Each inhale a reminder of life, of presence, of awareness. James gestured toward a row of tomato plants, demonstrating the gentle support of stems and roots, and Liesel mimicked the motion, feeling the soil give slightly beneath her fingers, absorbing the lesson in patience, attention, and care. The sun climbed slowly, heat pressing gently against her back, yet the cadence of activity, the subtle interplay of hands and tools, voices and laughter, captured her focus completely, allowing discomfort to fade into the background. She watched a horse guided through a narrow path by a farmer, the animal moving with trust, ears flicking, muscles rippling under careful hands, and Liesel sensed the quiet power of observation, the importance of mindfulness, and the trust that could exist without coercion. The field hummed with ordinary life, the shuffle of boots against dirt, the clatter of tools, the soft rustling of leaves, the distant song of a bird, and Liesel felt herself tuning into the rhythm, noticing patterns, gestures, relationships that spoke of community, patience, and understanding. A woman brought a small tray of water and bread, offering it with a smile, and Liesel accepted, feeling the gesture, tasting the cool refreshment, and sensing the unspoken message of welcome and care embedded within. Shadows grew longer, the golden hue deepening to a soft amber, and Liesel moved with deliberate care, integrating herself fully into the flow of labor, matching movements with farmers, anticipating motions, aligning her rhythm with theirs. Hands and eyes working together, mind attuned to subtle cues and human nuances. She noticed the connections between individuals, a glance, a nod, the careful placement of tools, the measured pacing of work, all gestures conveying patience, cooperation, and quiet understanding. The sun dipped lower, warmth lingering on her skin, the air filled with earthy scents, the subtle sounds of work and life blending into a living symphony. And Liesel felt a profound recognition settle within her, an understanding that trust, kindness, and community could flourish in ordinary moments, through ordinary labor, with gestures observed, mirrored, and respected. Her steps became more fluid, hands more confident, awareness expanding with each action, absorbing lessons of connection, diligence, and attention, realizing that in this ordinary afternoon, among these sunlit rows, she was witnessing and participating in a quiet humanity that endured across history and circumstance, a revelation that resonated deeply as light faded and the farm held its steady, timeless rhythm. The evening air cooled slightly as Liesl Schmidt continued her steps along the field, the golden sunlight fading into soft hues of amber and rose. She carried the wooden crate with a steady rhythm, hands firm on the worn edges, muscles learning the subtle dance of weight and balance, while her eyes tracked the coordinated movements of the farmers around her. James Reynolds walked beside her, calm and measured, his presence reassuring without a word, allowing her to absorb the world around her fully. Liesl noticed how the farmers communicated with one another through gestures, nods, and glances, a silent language of understanding that spoke volumes without a single syllable. The familiar German names etched on fences and barn doors shimmered in the fading light: Bauer, Schmidt, Muller, each one a reminder of the continuity of heritage, of identity preserved in a foreign land, and each one connecting her past to the present in ways she had not anticipated. A child skipped past with a basket of freshly harvested vegetables, giggling as the crate wobbled in her hands, and Liesl felt a small thrill, a recognition of innocence and joy flourishing alongside responsibility and labor. She paused briefly to observe a farmer carefully guiding a horse along a narrow trail, hands firm but gentle, the animal moving with trust and ease, a silent lesson in patience, attentiveness, and harmony between human and creature. Liesl mirrored the motion, adjusting her own grip and stance, learning the subtleties of coordination and observation, integrating herself seamlessly into the rhythm of the farm. The afternoon sun lowered further, warming her back, soft against the sweat-dampened fabric of her uniform. Yet her focus remained on the patterns of movement, the gentle collaboration, the quiet respect displayed in ordinary gestures. She observed a woman approaching with a tray of water and bread, the smile on her face simple and unassuming, yet brimming with generosity and care, and Liesl accepted the offering, tasting the cool water, feeling the bread, sensing the significance of nourishment shared without expectation or ceremony. Around her, laughter and soft conversation drifted through the fields, punctuating the steady cadence of work, each sound contributing to the quiet symphony of life unfolding before her. She lifted another crate, guided it alongside a farmer, noting the smooth efficiency of movement, the subtle attention to detail, the understanding that harmony came not from instruction alone, but from observation, cooperation, and mindful presence. James moved slightly behind her, watching, allowing her to integrate her learning, to make discoveries at her own pace, to understand through practice and attentiveness. The shadows grew longer, stretching across the field in a gentle pattern, highlighting the curves of the earth, the lines of crops, the arcs of human motion, the subtle choreography that defined the work of the farm. Liesl felt a deepening sense of participation, a quiet exhilaration in observing, learning, and contributing, hands steady, mind attentive, heart opening to the patterns and rhythms of life surrounding her. She noted the interwoven acts of care, each one small but significant. A nod, a smile, the careful placement of tools, the patience of guidance, the measured pace of labor, all combining into a living expression of community and trust. As the sun lowered toward the horizon, the golden light softened into warm tones, and Liesl's movements became more fluid, more intuitive, her awareness heightened, senses attuned to the subtle shifts of shadow, sound, and motion, feeling herself part of the quiet, sustaining rhythm of this ordinary yet extraordinary farm, understanding that connection, trust, and human goodness could unfold naturally, step by step, gesture by gesture, in the cadence of daily life. The sun had dipped lower, casting a rich amber glow across the vast fields, the gentle sway of corn and wheat catching the last light and setting the air aglow with warmth. Liesl Schmidt moved with measured steps, carrying a basket filled with freshly harvested vegetables, the weight familiar now, each motion precise and mindful, her hands guided by both memory and observation. She watched as the farmers worked alongside her, their movements seamless, the soft cadence of lifting, bending, stacking, and guiding creating a rhythm that pulsed through the land itself. James Reynolds walked beside her, his presence steady, silent, providing assurance through proximity rather than instruction, allowing her to engage fully with the unfolding world around her. The air carried the scent of ripening crops and sun-warmed soil, mixed with the faint aroma of hay and distant wood smoke, and Liesel inhaled deeply, letting each sensory detail anchor her in the present, grounding her awareness in the living landscape. Familiar German names, Schmidt, Bauer, Muller, appeared again on fences, gates, and barn doors, each one linking her memory, her heritage, and this new environment in a thread of recognition that felt both surprising and comforting. A small child darted past, balancing a pail of water, laughing softly as the contents shifted without spilling, and Liesel allowed herself a quiet smile, absorbing the innocence and rhythm of daily life that seemed so effortlessly intertwined with work and responsibility. She adjusted the basket she carried, noticing the texture of the produce, the warmth against her hands, and the subtle strain that reminded her of the effort required in every task. James indicated a row of tomato plants, showing her how to support the stems, water carefully, and assess the soil, and she mimicked his movements, learning through touch, observation, and repetition, the lessons of patience and attentiveness integrating naturally into her understanding. The sun pressed gently against her back, warmth spreading across her shoulders, yet she was absorbed completely in the rhythm of labor, the quiet harmony of people, tools, animals, and land moving together. Liesel observed a man guiding a horse down a narrow path between fields, hands confident yet gentle, the animal responding with trust, a subtle lesson in balance, observation, and care that required no verbal instruction. Around her, the soft laughter of children, the low hum of conversation, the clatter of crates and baskets, blended into a living symphony of farm life, and Liesel felt herself attuning to its rhythm, internalizing the nuances of gestures, timing, and human connection. She noted the smallest actions, the careful placement of a basket, a nod between workers, a hand extended in guidance, and recognized how these ordinary motions conveyed trust, patience, and cooperation, forming an invisible thread that bound the community together. Shadows lengthened, the golden light softening into warm, muted tones, and Liesel moved with increasing fluidity, hands and eyes coordinating naturally with the tasks, her awareness sensitive to the subtleties of the environment, the sway of leaves, the texture of soil, the temperature of the air, and the unspoken dialogue of shared work. James walked nearby, silent support, allowing her to absorb the unfolding patterns, to draw insight from her surroundings, and to engage fully in the shared labor without pressure or direction. She felt a growing sense of belonging, each action reinforcing connection, each observation deepening her understanding of patience, diligence, and the quiet generosity that sustained life here. The distant song of birds, the rustle of leaves, and the gentle clatter of tools created a tapestry of sound that framed her experience, each note a reminder of the subtle balance between effort and care, observation and participation. Liesel adjusted her grip on the basket, inhaling the scents, noting the interplay of light and shadow, the motions of the people and animals around her, and realized that in the ordinary gestures of labor, in the rhythm of shared purpose, she was discovering a profound humanity, one that endured quietly, gracefully, and persistently across time, circumstance, and place, and that in this rhythm she could find her own place, her own understanding, and a sense of harmony that had previously seemed impossible in a world she had thought defined by distance, fear, and unfamiliarity. The sky deepened into shades of rose and violet as the evening approached, the sunlight softening into a golden haze that draped the farm in quiet warmth. Liesel Schmidt adjusted the basket in her hands, feeling the familiar weight, the rough texture grounding her as she moved alongside James Reynolds, whose presence remained a steady reassurance without words. The farmers continued their work with quiet efficiency, lifting crates, guiding animals, tending to rows of crops, their gestures coordinated and effortless, a testament to experience and shared understanding. Liesel noticed how the small acts of kindness intertwined with labor, a hand steadying a bucket, a nod to indicate direction, a gentle laugh at a minor slip, all forming a silent dialogue of cooperation and care. The familiar German names etched on fences and barns shimmered in the soft light. Schmidt, Muller, Bauer, and Liesel felt a deepening connection, realizing that these threads of heritage were alive and present, woven into the fabric of this new world. A young child ran past with a basket of freshly gathered corn, the laughter clear and bright, echoing across the fields, and Liesel allowed herself a soft smile, sensing the innocence and joy that persisted in the rhythms of daily life. She paused to observe a man guiding a horse along a narrow path, hands confident yet gentle, the animal responding with trust, a silent lesson in patience and attentiveness, the subtle communication between human and creature revealing the harmony inherent in careful, deliberate action. Liesel mirrored the gestures, her hands adjusting to the weight, her eyes tracking the subtle movements, absorbing the lessons of observation, balance, and care. The warmth of the day lingered, pressing against her skin, yet she felt entirely absorbed by the cadence of work, the coordination of people, animals, and land, each movement a thread in a living tapestry of life. She noticed the soft laughter and conversation drifting across the fields, blending with the low hum of insects, the rustle of leaves, the gentle clatter of crates and tools, a symphony of ordinary life that carried its own profound meaning. James moved quietly beside her, watching without intrusion, allowing her to draw insight from observation, to integrate her understanding through practice and attention, learning the unspoken language of gestures and timing that guided the farmer's actions. Shadows grew long and soft, the golden light deepening, illuminating the curves of the land, the patterns of movement, and the flow of activity, each element reinforcing the sense of interconnectedness, patience, and trust. Liesel felt herself moving more fluidly, anticipating the rhythm, adjusting her steps, lifting, guiding, observing, aligning with the natural cadence of life around her, hands and eyes fully attuned to the environment. She noticed the smallest interactions, a careful placement of a crate, a guiding hand, a shared glance, each conveying communication, trust, and cooperation without words, and she began to understand that these ordinary gestures held extraordinary significance, shaping the rhythm and harmony of the community. The colors of the farm deepened as the sun neared the horizon, warmth lingering, shadows stretching, and Liesel moved with deliberate attention, absorbing details, integrating herself fully into the life of the farm, feeling a subtle exhilaration in participation, observation, and connection. She sensed that in the quiet repetition of work, in the careful, consistent gestures of care, in the rhythm of shared effort, there existed a profound humanity, resilient and enduring, and that through attention, patience, and openness, she could find her own place within this living, breathing community, understanding that trust, connection, and ordinary acts of kindness could carry far greater weight than she had ever imagined. The sun had nearly set, painting the Virginia farmland in deep shades of amber and rose, the long shadows of corn and wheat stretching across the soft earth as Liesel Schmidt adjusted her grip on the wooden crate she had carried all day. Each movement was now instinctive, the rhythm of lifting, bending, and walking aligned with the flow of the farmers around her, her hands and eyes attuned to the subtleties of motion, timing, and care. James Reynolds remained at her side, silent, offering steady presence and reassurance through proximity, his calm energy allowing her to observe and internalize without interruption. She watched the farmers one last time in the fading light, noting the quiet coordination, the soft words exchanged, the subtle gestures of support, nods, and gentle touches that conveyed instruction and encouragement without fanfare. The familiar names, Schmidt, Bauer, Muller, appeared on barns, fences, and signposts, now woven seamlessly into her perception, a bridge between her past and this new life, anchoring her understanding of continuity, identity, and human connection. Children ran past, baskets of produce balanced carefully in their small hands, laughter ringing clearly across the fields, and Liesel felt the warmth of joy that seemed to radiate naturally from every corner of this community. She paused to watch a farmer guide a horse down a narrow path, hands firm yet gentle, the animal moving with trust and precision, and she reflected on the lessons of patience, attentiveness, and mutual reliance she had absorbed in these hours, understanding that harmony required observation, care, and steady engagement. The air carried the scent of earth, ripening crops, and the faint smoke from distant chimneys, mingling into a comforting presence that anchored her fully in the moment. Liesel took a deep breath, feeling the heat of the day fade and the gentle cool of evening brush against her skin, carrying with it a subtle sense of accomplishment, awareness, and awe. She moved slowly, hands adjusting the crates and tools she had worked with, each touch a meditation on the ordinary yet extraordinary lessons learned through effort, observation, and connection. James walked nearby, allowing her space to absorb fully, his quiet presence a reminder of trust and guidance without intrusion. She noted the minor gestures again, the careful placement of baskets, the patient guidance of a tool, the acknowledgement of effort with a nod or glance, and recognized that in these small, consistent acts lay the foundation of understanding, connection, and humanity. The golden light of evening softened further, shadows stretching long and slow across the fields, the sounds of wind, insects, and distant voices blending into a gentle symphony that framed her awareness, each detail teaching her a lesson in mindfulness, cooperation, and grace. Liesel moved along the rows one final time, integrating herself with the rhythm of the farm, her movements smooth, intentional, aligned with the cadence of labor and care, noticing the balance between human effort and the living land, and understanding that every gesture, every careful observation, and every small act of generosity carried meaning far beyond the immediate task.